Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Policy Institute. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes, co-founder of the Illinois Opportunity Project, on this edition of Illinois Rising. Thank you for joining us on this year-end edition. Happy holidays to all. We can't talk about the year without talking about Chicago, and in particular, Tiny Dancer's reclamation project on his political reputation and prospects for re-election in 19, particularly with Hillary Clinton not winning the presidential election. Tiny Dancer has nowhere to go, so he's got to make the best of it in Chicago amid spiraling property taxes and failing schools within a bankrupt school system, and of course, just the incredible street violence where you have more murders, raw numbers, in Chicago in 2016 than in New York and LA combined. 1/6 of the population, and not even adjusted, forget adjusted for population. More murders in Chicago than LA and New York combined. I have to keep saying that so that it actually registers how profoundly disturbing that reality is, and it's the reality in Chicago. So, and then of course, we had this past week, you had convicted felon, former Chicago Alderman Sandy Jackson, rear her head because she and Jesse Jr. are getting divorced.
I'm surprised.
Why?
They were so in love.
The Bruce Lee memorabilia couldn't keep them together, and then Willie Cochran, Southside Alderman, 26-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department before he was elected alderman, he gets indicted for the standard issue extortion and political corruption charges. And so, what does a Chicago resident have to take away from the year that was?
That the chief executive of their city is perhaps the least successful politician in the country. And to me, what this says is if the center-right doesn't coalesce around a candidate that they can actually support between now and the 2019 election, they're crazy. Because what you've just described is utter and complete failure in one of the world's great cities. Aside from this political mess, people feel, and I do, I'm a Chicagoan, as are you, I feel like this city is a world-class, wonderful, wonderful city that could be just incredible. And if the populace can't recognize all of these problems, and they would, if there was an alternative, it can't be Chuy Garcia, right? It's got to be a center-right alternative. Maybe someone from the business community who runs, who starts early, who gets structural, financial, and other support from the business community, from outside community, from the president of the United States, from whomever, because this cannot and should not be able to persist. And if Rahm Emanuel is reelected under these circumstances, then those of us on the center right and who love this state and love our city have completely failed.
Well, I think you could argue that we failed to this point already. It would just be the failure continuing. Now, in terms of a center-right candidate to run against Rahm, and maybe in some of these aldermanic races too, there's some wards that are fairly close when you look at totals in other races, how they shake out in the city. But Hillary Clinton won Chicago 88-12. That doesn't hold out a lot of hope for somebody of a center-right perspective that will be immediately branded a Republican, and apparently the strain of Stockholm Syndrome that afflicts Chicago denizens is so strong that is all you need is to identify somebody as a Republican and they immediately vote against that person.
Well, Dan, what is going on? I don't understand this. And I saw the neighborhood that I grew up with was the Northwest Side, was actually the closest. It was like 55-45, in that sort of Edison Park, Cumberland Foster area, the far Northwest Side. What is with
Where
people?
Police and fire.
What is with people in Lincoln Park and Lakeview and some of the near-in places? Like, and I get it. I get this, the minority community, the strong vote out of the African American community that's obviously overwhelmingly Democrat. But what is with the rest of the pockets of the city where it would go 88-12? What's happening there? I can't explain it.
Well, Yeah, I mean, you have the Champagne socialists on the lakefront. You have people that are, Chicago is being hollowed out. In Chicago this year, there's just a story in Cranes a few days ago that I've seen a population bump in the city center where all the action is, right? 40,000 over the last 5 years, kind of a midterm census review. And the rest of the city is kind of like minus 2,000. The south side's being hollowed out, the west side's being hollowed out, both by death and by people leaving who can get out because they don't want to be killed. And so what are you left with? You're left with people that are doing well, and so they're largely insulated from terrible public policy, and they're not feeling the effects of violent crime that afflicts many neighborhoods. And
a lot of young people in like the Lincoln
sure.
Park and Lakeview and all those places, Bucktown.
So they don't have a huge stake in the game quite yet. They're getting there, and their perspectives will perhaps change. And then, of course, to be a little bit reflective, self-reflective, and the Republican Party has completely abdicated the city for the better part of the last 40 years. So if you don't present a choice, it's difficult to expect that people will, seek one out that you're not presenting. Oh, well, this is the choice. It's Chewy or it's Tiny Dancer.
Right. That's my point. That's why we need somebody else in there who's a real live human being.
Yeah. No, I mean, you need to establish a beachhead, even if it is kind of a foundation building exercise for future electoral success, because obviously Chicago is more culturally conservative than, say, in New York, and they've had high-profile Republican mayors, as we all know. Giuliani.
Do you know I have a Dan Proft 19 sticker in my car?
Yeah,
I don't know if you know that.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, I think, look, I don't know. I mean, after this election, with what happened all around us again, and did not happen in Illinois, particularly in the suburbs, as we spoke about previously, and then just kind of where the city is at, the pounding that people take, and they just leave, the ones who can leave. And then you got, young professionals that are sort of oblivious until they get a stake in the game. And then what happens to them? They leave too. So you've got all of these people who are insulated in real time from terrible public policy. And when it hits them,
they're gone.
They're either gone because they can be, or they're left with no choice. So they stick it out to see how much they can endure. So, I mean, I guess that provides an inflection point for the center-right candidate that you're speaking about. But that person or that slate of candidates, really, because I think it's more than a one-person job, boy, that needs to be identified. So, get to work.